am going to hit the record button.
This meeting is being recorded.
That will allow us to send a recording to anybody who wants to listen to this afterward, or if you want to forward this to any of your colleagues, you may go ahead and forward this as you see fit. So I am going to, if you are not on mute, you may go ahead and put yourself on mute, and I can help with that as well. All right. So let's start here. So my name is David DeYoung, and I am the chair of the Division of Educational Leadership at the University of South Dakota. So I'm presenting today from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And before this, I was a 3rd and 4th grade teacher and a principal and a superintendent for 8 years in Iowa. And now I've been in higher education for the past 7 years. And I just love it. So one of the reasons I love higher ed is I'm able to research what I want to research and dive deeper into something that I'm really excited about. And simulation research is one of those. So today I have 30 peer-reviewed publications, and I'm going to talk about 3 of them today. And all of them have to do with simulation and simulation research. So here's our agenda. Hopefully we have, you can open the chat feature right now. And if you haven't already done so, if you'd be willing to introduce yourself and say where you're from, we'd love to capture some of that and welcome you. Also, I'm going to be watching the Zoom throughout this whole entire meeting. And if you have questions, you may go ahead and just type them in the chat feature. And eventually I'll get to those questions and answer anything that's you're wondering about. So let's keep a lively chat feature throughout this time. Now, we have 3 major points that we're going to cover today. The first, I'm going to give you a Cliff Notes version of what I've learned and what we're going to go over. Next, I am going to go into 3 different research studies that I have led about simulations. And then we're going to end with a question and answer time where people are invited to stay on for as long or as little as you like. I know you have a lot of different meetings and a lot of things competing for your time. So let's dive into the Cliff Notes right away. Moving from being a school leader to higher education is more of a challenge than what most people think it is. At least it was for me. So when you get hired in higher ed, if you're on a tenure track position, you usually have a contract that is 60% teaching, 30% research, 10% service. And for a lot of principals or superintendents, going in, the teaching part goes pretty well, and the service part comes pretty naturally. The research is a challenge. And my supervisor taught me how to have my teaching inform my research and my service, my research informing my teaching and my service, and my service informing my research and my teaching. Now, that's a lot of words in there. But what I learned to do is build on each other. Don't silo those 3. And it took me 6 years to realize this about myself as a leader and a teacher and a researcher and a servant to higher ed and to education. But who I am is a person that loves simulations. That's what I found out about myself. So my intersection point for all of this is research, is school simulations. All right, today we're going to talk about my first research article. What I found out is that school sims are highly relevant and engaging. And so way back in 2018, one of my favorite colleagues, Trent Grunmeyer, he's at Drake University, was also into simulations. And we had, between the 2 of us, we were teaching 42 aspiring school leaders. He was at Drake, I was at University of South Dakota, and we got IRB approval to conduct a survey, and we sent it to 42 people that experienced the simulations. And what we found is that 42 out of 42 thought they were either effective or highly effective. And we came away from that first study thinking, wow, maybe these simulations are a little bit better than what we even think that they are, if people are saying, yes, they're awesome. So I'm going to dive deeper into that study, but that's the Cliff Notes version. Second study that we'll talk about, I learned that simulations create this safe space for leaders to talk about what they need to talk about. And I'm talking about like the most challenging topics out there to discuss as a professor or as a school leader. So whether it was conversations about race or gender or equity or whatever it may be, I found that simulations, if you allow people like an opportunity to just process why they made the decisions that they made, what happens is the simulations create that space for them to talk about it. So that was my big takeaway, and I'll tell you how I reached that conclusion when we dive into that study. And the third study, I'm in the middle of it right now. Do simulations work in a fully online asynchronous format? What I realized is I was the first professor in the world to use simulations from SchoolSims in a fully online asynchronous setting. And I have 658 different posts in my class that I'm analyzing right now. I'm doing a content analysis. So you'll see breakout discussions after each one of these studies. I'm going to tell you what I learned in each one of these 3 studies, and then I'm going to send you to a breakout room. And I know I'll make them big enough for people to share what they've learned. And I just kind of want to foster a discussion amongst small groups. And then finally, if I don't tell you this later, I want to tell you right now, if you're looking for a partner on research, pick me. I'd love to be a part of any research study that you may be thinking about, whether it's just helping you design the study, whether it's brainstorming, or whether it's being like a co-author with you. I would love to join you on that. All right. The first study that I conducted on simulations, here we are. It's called Educational Leadership Simulations, Learning Lessons from the Behind the Curtain of Educational Leadership. And I am going to throw this link, let's see if I can get it here, in the chat feature. Let me end the show. So that way, if you want to download this or if you want to look at it while we're talking, you may grab it. So I'm sending it to everybody in the meeting. It's in the chat feature right now. All right, I'm going back here. So that's a link if you want to look at this more in depth. Like I said earlier, there are 42 students that you might say that are in our study, and we got IRB approval from our universities. And after they got done experiencing 4 simulations in our classes, now this was a face-to-face class where we happened to meet on Saturdays, we would send them a survey. And what we came away with was 4 different themes. The first theme that people talked about is that the simulations were highly engaging. Now, I don't want to gloss over that, because if you've experienced a simulation on your own, or if you have facilitated one, what you've probably realized is it captures the attention of the participants, and it doesn't take much to get them feel like they are like a part of the simulation. So they are designed to bring people in and engage them in conversations about why they made the decisions that they make. So it was that was something that we suspected may come out of the study, but we were pleasantly surprised at that was our #1 theme from the survey. The second theme that we talked about that we learned was that the participants felt like they really had to think deeply when they were asked to explain why they made the decisions that they made. Because as leaders, the research shows that you make thousands of decisions in a day, to the point where anybody who's ever led like a school building or a school district, they suffer from, getting tired of making decisions. I still feel like I can't just help my wife decide what we're going to have for the evening meal. She'll ask me what I'm hungry for. I'm like, I don't even know. Like, you just put food on my plate. I can't make any more decisions in my day because we make lots of decisions. But we don't take time to stop and critically think about why we make the decisions that we make. So that was a surprise to us as researchers when we found that. The third theme was that the participants appreciated hearing somebody else's perspective. So if you've never experienced a school sim before, let me just describe it for you briefly. It's like a video-based choose your own adventure book, where you'll watch a video where like a narrator usually will tell you the context of the sim, and you'll get to your first decision point. And at each decision point, you usually have between 2 and 8 answers. A lot of times it's 4. And then based on your decision, it leads to a new video and you keep playing the simulation out. And when I facilitate them, I always make people commit to their answer. And then I have them turn to the one person next to them, talk about what letter they chose and why. And when you get small groups of leaders talking about why they made the decision that they made and listening to that from somebody else, that's where the real magic happens, in my opinion, from my experiences. And people come away saying things like, I never thought of what Jerry's perspective was on this situation. I'd actually like to go back and change my answer of what I chose. And how often does that happen in our society today, that we listen to the different perspectives of people? We all know that that's not often enough, but school sims, at each decision point, they provide that. So what I learned is this happened so many times when I was presenting. I would bring University of South Dakota coffee mugs, and for the first person that told me that they changed their mind after they listened to their peer, I would throw them a coffee mug and I would say, I love it. That's good leadership, when you listen with an open mind to either a peer mentor or somebody that's been there before you as a mentor, and you are open-minded. That's the type of leaders that we need in our schools today and in the future. So anyway, I actually learned that from this study of that they appreciated different perspectives. The final thing that we talked about is, or the final theme, people felt like they gained an experience from the simulation that they feel more confident that they can go out and lead a little bit better in their school building or their school district. So I don't know, it was a pretty simple study, you might say. The other ones I'll talk about are maybe a little bit more complex, but this is what we found from our surveys. Now, this comes to our first breakout session that we're going to go into right now. So I am going to copy these questions, and these are just sample questions of what you can talk about in your group. Or you can just go and you can just listen to other people in your group. You can talk about what stood out to you. Oops, let me go back. You can talk about how could the study be extended? What questions do you have for the large group? and how are you using simulations, and could you research how you are using simulations in your context as well. So it's meant to be kind of a free-for-all time for us to process what is going on. So does anybody have any questions about the breakout rooms as I assign them? I'm going to, there'll be like between 4 and 5 people in your group. 3 minutes, you may go. Nice. It looks like all of the rooms have at least 2 people that joined them. Perfect.
Hey, David, I just want to make sure you saw my chat.
I didn't. I like that idea.
Okay, or that's that daycare child care provider site. Meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Good to see everybody back here. Is there anybody that would like to talk about something, like a question that you came up with in your group, or you want to ask to the full group? If you want to, you can either, yes, I see, go ahead. Yangbu Du, is that how I pronounce it correctly?
Yambo, say in French or
Yambo.
German, and you'll be pretty close. So
right.
Yambo, yeah.
Yambo.
Yes, and it was the session ended right before, just as we were diving into it. But what I think everyone here, what's going to be very compelling is use of gaming and gamification and all those tools around some of these topics, since to personal and before pandemic, at the Games for Change festival year after year, there were always these various concepts that were simulating training sessions. So some, of course, were explicitly around education, but there were others that were simulating things like operating a surgery, for instance, or just anything that involves simulating something before you actually go out in the real world. So that's just a topic I'd like to bring up that we covered just as the session's closed.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. You know, the more, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation as well, but people really feel like when they gain an experience in a safe environment without any real world ramifications, they feel grateful. And I'm going to be very vulnerable for a second here. I live in the state of South Dakota, and a lot of you may not know it, but it is a very conservative state. And so what the best feedback that I get from the school leaders is putting topics out there that might be controversial. And I let them dive in that simulation, and they're like, thank you for giving me an experience before I'm leading that in a real world setting. So the gamification process and what that opens the door to is really fantastic. I'm going to go to the chat feature a second. Our group has very little experience with simulations. If you want a demo, I'm going to talk about at the end a free demo that you can get access to those. I wonder about creating simulations in the DEIB spaces. Yes, let me just go to that right now. So I'm going to stop share. Hang with me a second. And I'm going to share how you can search for this. It's in SchoolSims.com. I just dropped it in the chat feature. And now I'm going to share my screen again. If you want to know which topics are covered in these simulations, The quickest way to do this is go to schoolsims.com. And if you want something in the spaces that you were talking about, let's say equity, if that's where you want it, here are the simulations. This is a quick filter that shows you which simulations would be good in that area. And I found those when I'm deciding which simulation to use, I'm like, what are my goals for this sim? I'll actually go right here to this website to start. Diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. Do you also include justice? Yes, if there's a topic that we don't have in our library, how that starts is somebody like you being like, hey, we need a simulation about this. Our team will work with you to write that and shoot a video. That's actually how all 30 plus of the simulations started. Next, the teacher sim simulations I spoke of in our breakout room have been focused on that. Yes. We are also, there was such a demand. It started off as ed leadership sims. There was such a demand for teacher sims that I think they released 3 or 4 of them in the last month here. And we are exploring those. Perfect. Anything else before we get back to the next study? Go ahead and raise your hand or throw a question in the chat feature. All right, you can see my new screen. Oh, I saw 2 come up in the chat. Good. Realize their implicit bias. I work as a teacher coach and looking at the sims and the link like they could be helpful. Let's talk about bias for a second. That's a good segue here. All right. The disruptive simulation is my all-time favorite sim. And I did a research project that took me about 2.5 years, included 77 participants in it. And how it works is I was leading this, well, let me not give the plot away. Let's dive into the sim right now. And let me show you how these work. So if you go to the disruptive teacher simulation, right here, they're all HTML based, and it leads you to this screen right here where we will go through the sim, and this will take about 10 or 15 minutes. So the simulation begins with Kim Campagna, who is like a go-to teacher on our team, and we're the principal. And she comes into our office, she shuts the door, and she shares a concern that she has about Diana Walsh, who doesn't look nice in this picture because she's not a nice human being. Okay, so you've been warned about Diana. We'll also meet Brian Beck, who's on our team, and he's a 6th grade teacher, and Christy Lopez as well. So when I push next, a narrator is going to come on the screen, and the narrator is going to give us a couple minutes of context, and then we'll come to our first decision point. Here we go.
In this scenario, you're the principal of Brookside Elementary School. At Brookside, the less experienced faculty members tend to be special educators, and there's a divide between the veterans and the new faculty. You were concerned about the progress of students with diverse learning needs, so during your first 2 years at the school, you successfully established collaborative groups amongst the teachers with the intention of increasing student achievement. You've also initiated a co-teaching model where special education and regular education teachers are teaming in classrooms. Though still in the early stages, the collaborative groups have developed norms such as treat colleagues respectfully, make positive presumptions, notice your impact on others, and so on. Establishing norms seems to have helped the school climate, but more effort is needed. You're concerned that the staff still does not always treat one another in a professional manner. Your goal is to create a more positive tone in the school.
Cool. It is now late spring, and state test results indicate students in disaggregated groups are failing to make adequate progress. One of your go-to teachers, Kim Campagna, a special education teacher, is assigned to co-teach with a 6th grade teacher, Diana Walsh, who is particularly unpleasant. Kim is a teacher leader who seems well-grounded, highly professional, and someone who gets it. Moments before she is scheduled to facilitate the 6th grade collaborative team meeting, she asks to speak with you and then arrives in your office.
All right, let's meet Kim.
Thank you for meeting with me. I'm sorry I am so upset, but I've been trying to decide if I should even come to you about this. Now I think I've waited too long, but you must know, Diana is very tough on the kids. She has her favorites, but with some kids, she has such an attitude. She's sarcastic and she calls them lazy, and she's making some of them really shut down. I do all I can to build the kids up. We're supposed to be teaming in her classroom. She's making that impossibly hard. On top of that, she's just so rude to some kids and to me.
All right, we're going to come to a decision point, and I'm going to throw up a poll, and you're all going to vote on how we're going to respond to Kim.
How will you respond to Kim's concerns? Make a choice from the following. 1, thanks so much for opening up about your concerns, Kim. What are your perceptions about what is going on? Or 2, I've seen some of the same issues with Diana. I'm glad you feel comfortable coming forward. Tell me more about what you've been seeing. Or 3, Kim, you need to understand that she is trying to motivate kids that are falling through the cracks. Some of those kids just need the kind of tough love she is delivering. Or 4, I hear your concerns. The problem is that if it's just you, it is a he said, she said situation. I haven't heard from others who share your concerns.
All right, so on your screen, you should see a poll, and you may vote right now on how you would respond to Kim. I received like 10 people have already voted, and that's awesome. I wish you could see my screen. I get to see the results. It's all anonymous, but it's like all the way coming through here. All right. We have 70% of people, 73% of people that have voted. And I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to show you the results right now. So most people said the first option, which is very normal. When I did our study, 93% of people said the first option. And the second option, 14% of people. And usually when I break people into breakout rooms, they talk about this first sentence. I've seen some of the same issues with Diana. And we talk about like a leader's tone and their body language, because that is you can say that all different ways. You can say, I've seen some of the same issues with Diana. Or you can say, yeah, I've seen some of the same issues with Diana. And that is something that you may not be able to talk about as easy in a case study. So I'm just going to keep this going. And at the next decision point, I'm going to have send you into a breakout room to talk about it a little bit deeper. So since most of us said A, let's see how Kim responds.
Well, I'm here now, so I may as well just get it all out. I know a lot of kids really like her, but I think she is so demeaning. She gives me such nasty looks sometimes, and she'll stare at me, so I feel she's undermining what I'm trying to get done in class. Sometimes she won't even give me a table or a place to work with the kids. She treats me like I'm not a professional, like I'm not a teacher. I've seen her treat other staff that way too. She needs to be more respectful. Anyway, I'm sure I've taken too much of your time, and I know we both have to get to my team's collaborative meeting. I didn't mean to dump this on you, but I just didn't know what else to do.
Oh, if we had $1 for every time somebody said, I didn't mean to dump this on you. Right? That's when you know, all right, this was written by somebody in the trenches. And those little nuggets of relevancy are just littered throughout all of the simulations. So
how will you react to Kim's thoughts? Make a choice from the following. 1, Kim, this is really troubling. Your work is so important, and I'm concerned you aren't being treated respectfully. You definitely aren't taking too much of my time. Is there more? Or 2, it seems as though you've been thinking about doing something about this situation. Addressing your concerns directly with Ms. Walsh could be a good start. Do you think it would work if you reminded her about our positive assumptions norm? Or 3, Kim, thank you for sharing how uncomfortable you feel when working with Ms. Walsh. Since we're close to the end of the semester, do you think we can finish the school year and perhaps address this over the summer and into the fall?
Bad answer, don't choose that.
Or 4, let's go to the meeting. We can continue this conversation later. Thanks for sharing with me.
All right, you may vote again. All right, 9 people have already voted. That's awesome. And we have 3 different choices. This is fascinating to me. People from all over the country and the world are voting in on this. All right, and now I'm going to kind of share with you a little bit about what I mean with going to a breakout room to talk about what letter you chose and why. Those are my only guidelines for this. So I'm going to start a breakout room and I'm going to give you 3 minutes. It's going to seem really fast, but I'm going to have you go to a breakout room, talk about what letter you chose and why. You may go. All right, welcome back to the people from the breakout rooms. Anybody want to share a little bit about what you talked about in your group? Any brave souls out there? Push unmute.
I'll jump in. I chose, let me make sure I get the right one here. Number 2, so I guess B, and there were 2 reasons. There was, number 1, we always wanted to try and encourage our staff members to address the issues that they have and try and solve the problems on their own. The other thing that I said to our group was, the only thing that I would have added to that would have been a very simple question. Would you feel more comfortable if an admin sat in with you? That way,
Yeah.
You also offered some support, but you also were encouraging her to try and address the situation on her own.
Great. That's a great thing to talk about. And what I like about that is you extended the answer. That is a very normal part of what we do as a facilitator, to allow people to explain why they chose what they did. Fidelia, I want to make sure I pronounce
good
that
pronunciation. You did well, David. And I
you.
want to agree with David. I also selected number 2 because I think one of the first steps to address a conflict is communication. So I felt that the opportunity to talk, to allow the person to express how she felt, but I'd like the addition, the fact that if you would be more comfortable with an administrator present, that I think that's a great add-on. So I think that was great.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for sharing. Sally, would you unmute, please?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I was in my group, we had the last option and the second option about sending the teacher, to speak with their coworker first as a first step. And that's pretty common. But the other point that was made in our group is that continuing the conversation later gives you maybe more time to process it, especially if you have information that you think it's gone too far. That you think it's too toxic to recommend a basic step. So I appreciated our group's discussion on that. So thanks, Joe.
Yeah, great. One more. I see one more hand raised. Let's make sure. Yep, go ahead.
Yes, lastly, to expand on the previous comments, what could have also been an extension to the option, especially second option, is actually gathering more, figure out, is there much more relevant context about this, or even what could be helpful is that if, say, and someone in the admin, if they were to actually speak, at least try to get, and maybe the simulation will go into it, but at least try to get what Diane's side of matters is. So what she is feeling, how she's perceiving. So how would she justify her actions and such? And I mean, that's what I felt was the most missing piece at the moment.
Yes. The simulation does lead up to that, but yeah, great point. And as you can see, I'm sharing the results with you right now, and we have it split all the way down. So these simulations are not like the Oregon Trail that you may have done where you like live or you die. These are more like you make your choices and you experience the consequences of those choices, and you can always go back to talk about that again. Now, let me dive out of this simulation where we're at. Now you kind of get an understanding of like the context of a simulation and what a decision point is. I went to SchoolSims and I was like, this sim is awesome. It gets people talking about what they need to talk about. And it really talks about the communication piece as a leader. And they said, oh, that's interesting that you like this simulation. We actually had a school district in a country a long ways from the United States say that they wanted to use this sim, but they couldn't use it because it had female actresses in it. Because in that context, they could only have male actors. So they were like, we shot the same simulation with male actors. I'm like, you are kidding me. I go, show me that sim. So I got that sim, and this is what the beginning looks like. I'll play just a quick clip for you.
Thank you for meeting with me. I'm sorry I'm so upset. I've been trying to decide whether I should even come to you about this. Now I feel like I've waited too long. Well, you've got to know, Don is very tough on the kids. He has his favorites, sure, but with some of them, he's such an attitude. He's sarcastic and he calls them lazy. It's really starting to shut some of them down. I do all I can to build the kids up. I mean, we're supposed to be teaming in his classroom, but that he makes it impossibly hard. On top of that, he's just so rude to me and to some of the kids.
All right, now I realize that was just a 40-second clip, but what I meant to show you there is that I thought to myself, this is a research project. So my team and I, let me stop sharing. Let me go back to my actual study. We embarked on a 2.5-year study. And when we would present this sim, we would first number people off 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 around the room. And the ones stayed with me and I led one simulation, and the 2s went with a colleague and they did like the male only simulation. And then when we brought them back and we said, all right. And we showed them the same clips that I just showed you right there. And like, oh, they kind of blew their mind. They're like, no way, you have the same script, but one's a male and one's a female. And I just stopped and I had IRB approval and I went through a study and we audio recorded it. We got everybody's permission first. And I said to them, I said, all right, would you treat a female differently than a male if they bring a concern about a bully teacher? And it lit the room up with fireworks. And it really poked at something that was difficult to talk about. And we just captured all of the conversations and we came away with different themes. So here's what we learned. And this is, this article is called "The New Way to Facilitate Professional Discourse with School Leaders Using Video-Based Simulation." And what we found is that, with the female teacher in the simulation, they talked about the females being emotional, that they talked about the principal should intervene. When it was the male teacher in the sim, they talked about males should just handle the situation. The principal takes the male's concerns more seriously. And then and then another finding was people would say, well, it doesn't really matter if it's male or female. It matters more my relationship with the students. So this article is going to be published in the next days or weeks. Like it's literally right there. Now, here are some of the quotes that I took from our paper, and I don't like reading things out loud, but these are so important that I feel like I need to. So these are quotes. We talked a little bit about gender stereotypes of emotional women, and she's just blowing things out of proportion. Another participant added, girls are so full of drama. Does the woman seem like a whiner? Oh, yes. Oh, she's a woman. She must be. If a female comes in, I'm again probably going to be like, I'll help you with this one. I'll take care of that. One member of the group discussion came to the conclusion that you are going to help her. Stereotypically, you would expect a man to be able to handle a situation. The professional side of me was like, nope, I'll sit there and I'll treat everybody equal. But it's like, come on, you're a dude, go handle this. Now, that's hard for me to read out loud, but it is involved in this study, and it just came out where a simulation brought some of that conversation out. These are even more awful. You can read them on your own as well. So that brings us to discussion point breakout number 2. I'm going to give you a time to debrief with a breakout room. And again, no rules for what you can talk about. Just what are you thinking about with this second study? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes again, which I realize isn't much, but you may join your breakout room. Back in the webinar here.
Meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome back everybody from the breakout room. Does anybody want to unmute or raise their hand and share something that you talked about in your group? Go ahead. Oh, I forgot how to pronounce your name. Was it Youngbu? Go ahead.
Yeah, me myself. Yes, Yambo right there. So great.
Youngbu.
Yes, and actually, Holly brought up a very good point during the last breakout about really, it's often helpful to at least have a basic awareness of what someone's life history, what someone's life experience is, given that what she explained about something that happened, that how she was taught something that happened during her teenage years. It's a behavior, it's a habit that persisted through and through because of some experience then. So again, I just don't know whether in your studies, have you tried controlling for any of that? Have you tried, because it would be helpful. So it seems like what you just did was more of a regression type of study. That have you done more of a case method as well to dive deeper, because that is then going to surface some of those deeper nuances.
Yes. So I hope that this simple webinar gets people thinking about how to dive deeper and about how to organize a research study a little bit different than how we did it right now. So those are good ideas as well that you shared. So thank you, Youngbu. Christopher, you're next.
Thanks. I do a lot of evaluation on program effectiveness, and I have to tell you that simulation kicked me right in the shin because the flipping of the male to the female really brought out some unconscious bias. And we do so much talking about unconscious bias, and it's really hard to pin down and get people to feel it in a way that's full of empathy. And that simulation did it for me. I was president of my management association. So I was in 100 of those meetings where it was a principal and an assistant soup and all these things. And I'm beginning to realize now what I thought was kind of like personality also had maybe an inherent underlying bias in it. So thank you for that. That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. if we can use simulations to control for different variables and bring that out, and if we already know that simulations can create a safe space to talk about things that we need to talk about, I mean, we can make a big impact, which I just got goosebumps. Thank you, Christopher. Peg, you're next.
Well, quickly, that we were 2 women in our subgroup and we were both appalled by the comments. And it was very eye-opening to think that that kind of bias is still in people. But the second question was, was there any significant difference between the responses between males and females in the group? That would just be the additional question. You might have covered it, but that was an additional question we thought might be interesting.
Yeah, Peg, we found that females, because we had them identify their sex on the survey form, and females were statistically significantly harder on females than males were. Does that surprise you, Peg?
Yes, well, I guess to some degree, no, but to some degree, it's unfortunate, but it is not totally unexpected.
Right. Right. Okay, we have time for one more. Holly.
I just reacting to the comment about being horrified. I was kind of, I wasn't. I think that in certain areas, geographical maybe, I don't know, that those comments are run of the mill for me. I shared an experience where I was being literally bruised by a coworker, and it was all in jest, but after repeatedly asking him to stop, he didn't. So I went to my principal and asked, could you please just make this a little more serious? And I was told I was being too sensitive and to move on. So that thought of women being too sensitive, overreacting, all of those things, I feel like it's innate, especially in education, where so many men are in positions of power with so many women doing the groundwork. It's not healthy or necessarily appropriate, but I wasn't shocked by it at all.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Holly. And I just appreciate you sharing with the group. Hopefully we can make changes, right? And hopefully these conversations will lead to change behaviors. So thanks for sharing there. There were a couple questions in the chat feature. Which journal? This is Voices of Reformed. I just want to say hi to Sarah Dexter. Like, you know how you have like heroes in like your job? Sarah's one of mine. If you don't know who she is, she's awesome. One of my all-time favorites. So Voices of Reformed for that. And then Gretchen asked, was this an international comparative study? And if so, how did you consider the cross-cultural differences? It was not, although that would be a very good way to study this next time or replicate our study and do it like that. So I'm glad this is fostering those discussions. All right, here we go. Next, we have the third research article, and this one is in progress right now. And I don't even know the rules of like sharing what I found kind of in progress. So if I'm breaking rules, I apologize for that. I'm about 60% done with this, and this is a solo authored study that I'm going through. Basically, I use simulations for 7 spring semesters, and I use them in a fully online asynchronous setting. And I just wanted to find out, do these actually work in online asynchronous settings? So I got IRB approval from my university to do a content analysis. I'm using experiential learning theory, which I kind of captured from Dr. Dexter. And my preliminary theme, so this is like when they experience it on their own and then they come to my discussion boards and write, that it evoked emotion from people. They would write, I was so frustrated the entire time, or I had a pit in my stomach when, or I could feel my heart racing all the way through the simulation. And I thought to myself, wow, that is crazy. They're doing this on their own, and it's bringing out emotions enough for them to write about them. Another theme that surprised me is that they wrote about their desire to like take action. One person actually said in this disruptive teacher sim, they came out and they said, I actually realize I have one of these teachers, and if I don't do something about it, I'm gonna lose Kim, my good teacher. And it kind of was like a call to action. People write about their past experiences. Oh, that is so rich what people write in their past experiences. People would call out unethical behaviors when they were experiencing them solo, and they were able to identify them and write why they were unethical. And also the final one, this is a preliminary finding as well, meaning I've gone through them and coded them, but I haven't had colleagues and like other people outside of my situation code them, that they seemed relevant and realistic. So I'm going back to my comments. Implicit bias, yes, thanks T. Brown Warrens. What type of research design did you use for the study? It is a content analysis is what I'm studying. So it's just their responses to discussion posts. Our final breakout session to debrief. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes again, just to talk about this study or anything that you're thinking about. And then we'll come back and close out as a full group.
In one of the large programs out on the West Coast, where it's a program, it's a doc program offered by the Graduate School of Ed, but it's for every other group than K-12. There's no K-12 leaders in it. There's corporate leaders, there's higher ed leaders, and it's a communications course, and they're going to use the Sims as kind of the case studies, right? Because everybody's familiar with a school, but we focus on the interpersonal issues, the organizational dynamics, the leadership, the behavioral leadership issues. It just happens to be in a K-12 school context, but that can be extrapolated if you choose to do so into any context. And as David was mentioning, right, David has done that disruptive teacher course with a group of superintendents relative to board members, right? Because you have adult bullies on boards. It's that behavior, is that visceral reaction, that decision-making, that's critical if we get you into an authentic context, and then you can extrapolate from there. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer to say that we're certainly open to the idea of higher ed Sims. And we've seen application of them in that way, but obviously we can mix and match relative to where your interests might lie and support you in those efforts.
Thank you very much. That was helpful.
Thanks, Janet.
Ken, hi, good to see you. I have an idea for possible consideration for Sims, and it would touch upon some of what's been talked about here, and specifically with implicit bias, perhaps. But diversifying the educator workforce is I think a topic that is relevant all over the country. But in some of the work that we've been doing, we've worked with West Ed and learned of some tools to help school districts really look at their recruitment and hiring processes. And there's a whole, that would take a longer time than we have here to explain, but I'd be happy to do that. But I think that could, if we want a diverse educator workforce, right, we need to start with how do we get a diverse workforce, wanting to come to our schools. And so, like I said, I'm happy to connect with you and explain a little further, but I think it could be a good simulation to do all of what you said in terms of people reflecting on their practice, but it could also be planting a seed, I think, for what could be better practices in districts.
I love it.
Would you be talking about having, so for students to go through them or as they evolve or for hiring practices at the?
To be honest, I hadn't thought about it. The idea just kind of came up as we were in this discussion, but I think it would be more about like the school personnel involved in that whole recruitment and hiring process. I mean, ultimately, it's for the students, right? I mean, it's in the best interest of the students, but I think the decision makers would be the faculty involved in that recruiting and hiring process.
Absolutely. That'd be great. Love to talk to you further.
Great idea. Any other questions or discussion?
Yes, we'd like to bring up that, have you done these types of simulations and what you mentioned about the case with the male educators example? So what other regions have you been testing this? And for instance, probably I just wonder that simulation, did it happen to be coming from a place like South Asia or the Arab countries or any of those regions? So have you done anything in other just geographic or cultural contexts?
Yeah, I've trained people all over the world. I'll defer to Ken on this one, but I haven't done research in other countries, but that is a very natural like extension of some of the stuff that we've been talking about today. Ken, you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, in terms of the research, I mean, so using the modality of simulation, it can be utilized worldwide. And we had some research. We did a project with Catholic University in Chile, and they were using it from an assessment perspective. And it's been published, and the work is out there. And in fact, when you look at the cultural element of it and language, we're actually speaking with another country down in South America that also Spanish speaking, but they want to reculturize, if you will, the simulations that we've done in Spanish because their culture is different. So even though the language is going to be the same, especially when you're dealing with behaviors, you want to be in language, but you also want to obviously incorporate elements of the culture that are appropriate or not appropriate, or not to not incorporate those. So it can work, it's just how you write it. And so we've had discussions with folks in the Pacific, in the Middle East, and in South America relative to the application of this approach. We just need partners to work with in terms of development. But we've seen it work globally. It's a human issue.
All right, anything else for the good of the cause? All right, hearing none. Go ahead and if hopefully, tonight or tomorrow or the next day, this sparks some sort of like thoughts that you have. Send me a text, send me a call, send me an email, or contact anybody from the SchoolSims team. Let's just keep these conversations going and let's make a difference for the educational leaders throughout the world. So thanks again for coming today, and hopefully this is just the start of our relationship. Take care, everybody.